This video is a demonstration of the different features that is offered by FinViz, an application to help investors visualize data from publicly traded companies to help them build more informed and better investment strategies. Before searching for any stocks or updating any graphs, a user will be able to view the Value Finder graph that will automatically show the 15 most undervalued companies in the S&P 500 by looking at the difference between a company's 200-day moving average and current share price. The graph is colored and grouped by the specific sector each company belongs to. Currently, we can see that the consumer discretionary and healthcare sectors make up a large amount of the most undervalued companies, and Netflix is currently the most undervalued company in the S&P 500. A user can then choose to add specific companies to the graph by either searching or clicking from a drop-down list, and they will be able to view and compare the historical stock price performance of each company they have chosen. From the graph, we can see that Tesla and Google are causing scaling issues in the y-axis due to their very high share prices. So we can remove them from the graph by clicking on the relevant line in the legend to easily visualize the rest of the company's performance. From the graph, we notice that many of the stocks are performing badly. However, we have noticed Johnson & Johnson have had good performance, so we can view this company in isolation to get a view of its general performance. Finally, we can look at and view the historical share price of Tesla and Google in isolation. We are then able to change the relevant timescale by clicking on the buttons above the graph. For FinViz, we can choose between 1 month, 6 months, year to date, 1 year, 5 years, and the complete time frame. Lastly, if we scroll down, we can see that the Value Finder graph has been updated for the companies we have searched for. We can quickly see that Etsy and Facebook are deemed to be very undervalued companies. On the same page, users can also look to view the historical stock price of all companies in a specific sector. In this example, choosing from a drop-down with all S&P 500 sectors, we will choose to view all stocks within the information technology sector. From the graph, we can now see the stock price of every technology stock in the S&P 500, and the user is able to isolate and remove graphs as seen before and change the timescale. Scrolling down, the user is also able to see the Value Finder graph updated for all stocks within the technology sector. From the graph, we can see that Xilinx is trading far above its 200-day moving average, and companies like PayPal, Nvidia, and Ceridian are highly undervalued. However, in general, a user could conclude that the technology sector is highly undervalued at this moment in time. Going back to the stock price graph, we can see that there are too many lines currently on the chart, making the graph hard to analyze. Through different features, a user can reduce the number of lines on the graph to find companies that fit their investment strategy. Here we can see a user filtering companies off of the graph if they do not meet a certain financial criteria. In this case, the user only wants to see companies that have a PE ratio between 20 and 50. Here we can see the other financial metrics a user can filter companies off of a graph. They are market capitalization, dividend, revenue, and earnings. We can now see the number of companies on the graph has reduced. However, the user would further like to filter companies off the graph and only view companies with a strong set of earnings with a value between $0 and $1 billion. The number of companies has significantly reduced, and we are only showing companies that meet the financial criteria set by the user. To gain further insight into the graph, a user can set a color map based on a specific financial criteria. In this case, the user has chosen PE ratios, and now each line on the graph will be grouped and colored together based on the company's value for its PE ratio. Scrolling to the bottom, the user is able to see the value that each color represents. From the table, we can see that most of the PE ratios are between 20 and 30, with very few companies on the graph having a PE ratio between 40 and 50. The user is then able to inspect the value of each company's PE ratio and further analyze the graph. Lastly, a user further filters the graph as he only wants to view companies that offer a dividend between 2.5 and 5%. The user is left with two companies on the graph, which from the color map, he can quickly tell both have a PE ratio between 20 and 30. This is a very good ratio for a tech company. Clicking on the Momentum Trading tab, a user is able to view the momentum graphs and moving average graphs of any number of S&P 500 companies or sectors. In this example, we can see a user has added around 10 companies onto the graph and noticed that Facebook, Activision, and Domino's are currently quite volatile companies with periods of very high momentum. Toggling the buttons above the graph, the user is able to view each company's moving average graph to get a better understanding of each company's long-term trend. A user can see that Activision and Domino's have an increasing moving average, with Facebook's moving average leveling off in recent months. A user can then choose to view either the momentum or moving average graph of every company in a specific S&P 500 sector. In this example, the user has chosen the financial sector. Quickly analyzing a graph, the user can see that BlackRock and SVB Financial Group are very volatile, with large stock price movements in the short run. As seen before in the previous feature, a user can filter off graphs that do not meet the specific financial criteria. In this example, a user only wants to see companies that offer a dividend between 2.5 to 5% and have a PE ratio between 10 to 30. Clicking on the S&P 500 tab, a user is able to get a broader view of the financial performance of all stocks within the S&P 500. The user is able to view each stock's market cap, dividend, PE ratio, earnings, revenue, and net income. The user is able to change the order of the table to see which companies rank the highest or lowest for each financial metric. Here we can see a user ordering companies by earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. We can see that eBay, American Airlines, and the Carnival Corporation have the lowest earnings, with Apple, Microsoft, and Google having the highest in the S&P 500. Clicking on the Annual Reports tab, a user is able to visualize the key metrics from companies' annual reports and the yearly change of those metrics in the past 5 years. In this example, a user has chosen Microsoft and is able to view the year-on-year change in assets, cash, retained earnings, inventory, and debt from Microsoft's balance sheet, and they're able to view the year-on-year change of Microsoft's revenue, cost of revenue, gross profit, earnings before interest, and research and development costs. Due to the large differences in value between Microsoft's inventory and assets, a user can zoom in on the inventory bars to get a better view of their movements year on year. The user is also able to view the yearly change of common financial ratios and Microsoft's value for each ratio over the past 5 years. A user then searches for a breakdown of Netflix's financial statements, and we can see that over the last 5 years, Netflix has been performing very well, with assets, retained earnings, revenue, and profit increasing year on year. Clicking on the Stock Forecasts tab, the user is able to view a time series forecast for a company's share price, adjusted for the company's current sentiment score. The user is also able to view the news articles from where the sentiment score was derived. In this example, the user has searched for Amazon and can quickly tell that the company is forecasted to trend upwards, along with currently having positive sentiment, with a score of 1.13. We are then able to scroll down and see the latest 100 news article headlines relating to Amazon and a link to the article. From reading the headlines, we can see that the positive sentiment is due to the good news from Amazon's recent stock split and the positive outlook financial analysts have given Amazon based on the stock split. Clicking on the Portfolio tab, a user is able to create different portfolios with any number of S&P 500 stocks and compare the average price of each portfolio for the last 5 years. After adding the relevant stocks to each portfolio, we are able to visualize and compare each portfolio's performance. We notice that Portfolio 7 has performed very well, with companies like Costco, AutoZone, Activision, and Roper Technologies in this portfolio. By removing Portfolio 7, we can see that Portfolio 1 has performed very well recently, increasing from an average price of $100 to $250 in the last 5 years. This portfolio contains companies like Facebook, Tesla, Goldman Sachs, and Starbucks. From further analysis, we can see that Portfolio 3 has fallen from an average price of $350 to $250 in the last year, and Portfolio 5 has seen a large increase in its average price over the last few months.